So as James just said, I'm Joshua Ryan Saha. I'm working at the University of Edinburgh's City Region deal team. I've been in for about 4 weeks, of which most of it is me being either ill or on holiday, but you know, that's how I do things. I first want to thank you first for inviting me, but also for the last 4 talks, because I thought all of them were really interesting. And also I think that what hopefully the City Region deal will hopefully enable some of you to potentially do some of those really exciting innovations as well. One word of warning is I've been told that I speak far too fast, and I've been listening to podcasts on double speed, and that perhaps made the problem worse. So if I am going too fast, you can rewatch it later and slow it down, which might make it a bit easier. But this is actually my third Digital Solutions Conference in 3 years. Must be doing something right, or you're doing something terribly wrong. This was when I had the 5-minute pitch of a data lab talking about how data could be used for tourism. This was last year. Last year we launched something called the Edinburgh Tourism Innovation Challenge, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. And this is me with the requisite amount of glee to be at the ETAG Digital Solutions Conference. So I'm very delighted to be here, and the reason I'm here, not just because the reason I'm here is because, as has been said, I've got a new job. And the new job is not at a data lab, it's at the University of Edinburgh. And I think there are a range of opportunities for all of you to potentially get involved. So this is the new job title. It's fairly substantial. It's 16 words. It's not the worst job title I've seen. Some I've seen was called Chief Possibility Officer, which is actually an impossible to define job. But anyway, so this is my new job title. I'm the Data-Driven Innovation Sector Lead for Tourism and Festivals for the Edinburgh and South East Scotland City Region deal. It's great. I thought I'd sort of structure this presentation basically breaking this down as to what it means and what potentially it can do for the region. So starting off with the end, the South East Scotland and City Region deal programme. So this was in August. This was the signing of the City Region deal program. It was the best photo I could get. There was surprisingly few good photos of it. But this was when Theresa May, Nicola Sturgeon, and I should know his name, but the leader of the Council of Edinburgh signed the deal, which would be a huge amount of money invested into the region. It's £1.1 billion, both of £600 million of government investment, both Scottish Government and UK Government, and then £500 million investment from regional partners. So it's an amazing opportunity for the region. And this is sort of the targets of this program. I should mention that it's not all data-driven innovation. There's transport, and there is a culture offering a part of it as well. But data innovation is what is the selling point of the City Region deal. It was seen as the almost comparative advantage of the region. Data, artificial intelligence is something that Edinburgh, in particular the universities, is doing very well, but also with Codebase, conferences like this, there is a growing maturity of the tech scene and the data scene here. So what this investment is hoping to do is create at least 50,000 new jobs in and around data, 400 startup companies. Want to upskill a lot of people in data. It's still a fairly rare skill set to have. We've got hopefully 1,000 more businesses making better use of data, and I think we can get a huge number of tourism businesses doing that, but also generate £300 million in savings to public sector. So a fairly sizable target, but I think it's something we can do. And the whole idea is to create Edinburgh as the data capital in Europe. Now, we'll sort of go into what that means for the tourism sector, but basically the way I sort of conceive of it is, if you're a company wanting to use data, then you think about Edinburgh first. Or if you're a student that wants to learn or train in data, then you come to Edinburgh first. I should also mention that this is not just about the city. Of course, it's a region deal. So we're looking at Fife, Mid Lothian, East Lothian, the Borders, West Lothian. I think I've got them all. It's so that we can make sure that the whole sort of principle behind the City Region deal is the city is the major sort of hub of the economy, but it's about how you connect into that, which can drive broader economic growth across the region. So that's something that we're very acutely aware of. So how does this impact us? Well, first of all, there's a tourism and festivals sector lead, which is right here, and hopefully that I'll be able to try and produce, first of all, plan, but also a sort of range of projects that we can use data to drive some of that impact. There is, from that financial investment, there's six sort of infrastructure developments that are being created in Edinburgh. There is Easter Bush, which is around agricultural tech. There's Robotarium, which is a great name for robots, between Heriot Watt and University of Edinburgh. There's something called the Bay Centre, which was opened up, I think, yesterday, around digital technology. There's something called the Edinburgh Futures Institute, which is just close to here. It's opposite George Heriot School, the old hospital. And there's one which I've forgotten, Usher Institute, which is about health and data. And then there's a wonderful world-class data infrastructure, which is basically, for want of a better term, a huge data lake that people will be able to input their data. It will be a collection of sensors across the city that will sort of provide a lot more information around where people are, what they're doing, and all that sort of stuff. But that's investment in buildings. We need to make sure those buildings work for the city and for the region and for you. So this is where it sort of comes in, so the tourism and festivals part. Now, within that, I think travel tech is, of course, a sort of catch-all term, but it's particularly important for the city, with Skyscanner as the major unicorn in the city, and also interesting new sort of startups like Travel Nest and various organisations like that, so I'll sort of tag that on. Now, this is sort of a way I've conceptualized the tourism festivals sort of sector when it comes to data projects. The individual tourism businesses at the bottom, now they're a huge number. They can sort of go between small to medium to very large, but there's a huge number of small businesses. Now, not all of them are going to have huge sets of data, but data will be very, very important in how they can change where they work, change their opening hours, boost productivity, various things like that. So that's sort of one component. So for there, we're thinking about how do we support organisations like that to use their own data better, but also access data that is going to be useful for them at a time that they need it. I think one of the major problems or one of the major challenges that always comes to me around data and tourism is it's always quite old. It's always 2 years old, or it's, you know, you're getting data in 2015, you want it for now, you want it for a year ahead of us. So how can we do that? And I think, well, we know we've got the technology to be able to do that now. So hopefully we get that started. In the middle, destination-level organisations. So that could be public sector organisations, could be people like Marketing Edinburgh. And again, it's about how do they use data for almost the destination good. How can we share it better? How can they understand what's happening for everyone in a much more detailed and timely way? And then, of course, the platforms and the sort of global marketplace, both hotel chains, but also, as was rightly said by Peter at the start, these massive growing international platforms that are already really, really data savvy. Not just data savvy, you know, they're pushing the boundaries of what data science, artificial intelligence can do. Now, this city-region deal has to also cater to some extent for that. If we want to be the data capital of Europe, we need to be pushing the boundary. We need to be doing risky and interesting research across all the spectrum of data science. So actually, one of the questions there is how do we use this program to work to their problems as well? Things like fake reviews, which of course, you know, if you have a couple of extra stars on your TripAdvisor, it's a huge value to you as a business. So there's a massive incentive for fake reviews. Perhaps we could do something reviewing text data, start identifying it. How can we work with them in those ways? A crucial component of the interrelationship between these is, as I think again Pete rightly mentioned, there's a huge domination of those platforms. What is it about new business models that we can help individual tourism businesses share their data in a way that is sort of collaborative and empowering so that they are stronger in the face of what can be perhaps a homogenization and a bit of a dominance from platforms, which of course bringing some good, but how do we sort of bring a little bit of strength back as well into the local individual tourism businesses? So, data-driven, this is the second to last part of my deconstruction of my job title. So data science, this is sort of the sort of assumption that I usually make. It's around extracting knowledge from data. Now, why should we do that? We've had some good examples earlier, but if this is a report from my previous workplace, Nesta, inside the Data Wars, which said that if you are using data in your decision-making, you are 10% more productive. Now, we know that productivity is a big challenge for the tourism sector. 50% more likely to launch new products or services, almost definition of innovation. And a sort of £3,000 boost in profits per employee if you are using data in a sort of more advanced way. Now, these are some from about 2-3 years ago. These are going to have changed, but they stand true. If you're using data, you know what you're doing, you make better decisions, you can make better judgments in investment, both short-term and long-term. But I think crucially for data, it's not about just playing around and doing fun things. It's about having a very clear purpose around what you want to do. This is a really good approach that Eddie Copeland at Nesta produced around addressing specific problems using data. So rather than just saying we can do all this cool stuff, actually, what is the specific thing you want to know or do? How would you then do it? What data would you need to do it? And then sort of going back around. So that's sort of the approach we're trying to take as well. And it's one that you can hopefully see the slides later, I would recommend you looking at as well when taking on this journey. It's not just thinking, I need to get my data in order. It's more about thinking what you need to do, how you define it, and then thinking about the data and hopefully coming to the University of Edinburgh, Heriot Watt, other universities, other experts, other companies to find a way of doing it. So here's a couple of just mini examples that I think are quite interesting. I always mention Google Trends because it's not that well used. There's a really, really good book called Everybody Lies, which I recommend you read, which talks about just Google data. I mean, it's the search data is just so powerful. And if you get the terms right, then you can see actually what you're doing and whether it's increasing Google searches. I'm glad Pete mentioned a little bit about the museums because in Chicago, the art gallery, the major art gallery, modern art gallery there, had a really interesting program where they looked at heat mapping where people were in the museum at any one time, and they realized that people were sort of bunching up around particular paintings. Now, those paintings were obviously very popular, and then they used those paintings in their marketing, and it drove a massive increase in the amount of people going. And also it helped them changed the way they laid out the gallery, replenished their stock, all that sort of stuff. And I thought that was a really exciting example. The other interesting example of data in tourism is in Spain, very broad, but was looking about transactions data. And I like this one in particular because it showed what sort of people from different countries were more interested in buying. Apparently people in the UK and the US really liked buying a lot of food, and everyone else liked buying fashion, but I don't know, you read into that what you like. But I thought that was really interesting, and that one is because it's looking at different types of data sets. So with the tourism industry, we need to start thinking about the data sets around telecommunications, if we can access them, shows where people are going. I know that In Technology Wi-Fi are here, and they generously sponsored the Edinburgh Tourism Innovation Challenge last time, and they have data, of course, around where people are moving around the city, but also transactions data. It'd be really interesting to interrogate some of the data from the amazing project just described, Tip and Tap, or Tap and Tip. There's a lot of this data which is less about asking people what they did, more about knowing what they did. And I think we can start moving into that in that way. So the final bit, innovation. Now, so many times innovation is mentioned and never defined, and I'm guilty of it very much myself. So this is the way I try and define it quite broadly. This is called the innovation spiral. It's very cool. And the way it works is basically, innovation is not just inventing new stuff. It is about adopting, it is about copying, it is about scaling that up. It's all of that stuff. So at the sort of starting point, it's really about looking at the new challenges, generating some ideas, then actually trialing those ideas. Did they work? Didn't they work? Scaling that up, all that sort of stuff. But the key point here is how we change a system. If we're moving, and I think this conference is a very good way of doing that, but if we're moving towards a tourism industry in Edinburgh and in the regions around that is adopting data, that is more productive, that is innovating, creating new products and services, then we need to start in this way, and we need to then share. So what I'm hoping to do through this program is this. So where I think we're at the moment is we are doing a lot of exploring opportunities and challenges. We are generating ideas. We've got some great examples of developing and testing and experimenting with data. But we're still very much in the early stages. And that's good, because it means that we need to put more time and effort into generating new experiments using data with new organizations, new companies, and then using that, sharing that information, building a case, and then growing and scaling. And this City Deal program is up until 2030. So, this is roughly where I think we can get to. If we want to be a data capital in Europe in the tourism industry, then by 2030 we need to have a system that data is ubiquitous, is something we do. Artificial intelligence is what all of the organizations are adept at and use naturally. I'm going to sort of very quickly skip past this. This is just a process I'm going through at the moment, which is trying to map out some of the problems and challenges and ideas and thoughts that are going around the tourism sector at the moment. Turn them into very defined questions, so I can go through that sort of circular map that I showed before from Eddie Copeland. Defining some goals that we can realistically hope to achieve, and then also defining what we think the data capital of Europe looks like for the tourism sector. And then looking at possible data solutions with the people internally of university, data companies, to actually start scoping out what this could look like. So in terms of problem mapping, what I'm doing at the moment is speaking to a lot of you, many of you I've probably spoken to, around what are the current problems agnostic to data that you've got now, what are the things you want to do, what are the exciting ideas you have, and then thinking about actually where could we help push that forward, where can we help de-risk that. Here are some of the sort of problems that are coming up to me at the moment. These will be very, very obvious to you. I've already mentioned around the sort of more recent data sets, something that we know what's going on now or in the future rather than what's happened 2 years ago. I think for the Edinburgh Innovation Challenge we had last year, overcrowding was obviously one of those. I think perception of over-tourism as well. Looking at seasonality, all of this sort of stuff. And I think there's real scope for data projects, both at destination level and an individual level, to work on some of these. So here are some of the experiments that have taken place before. The Edinburgh Tourism Innovation Challenge funded some of these through the funding from ETAG and Scottish Enterprise. So Quest Native, I know Jolt is here, he's there, just giving a little wave. From the back of Edinburgh Tourism Innovation Challenge, he set up a great organisation, which I recommend you go chat to him afterwards, gamifying how you visit and discover new destinations in Edinburgh and the region. It's really exciting. And then there's another one, which is, I don't know how to describe it, I think it's Pulsecti, that sounds a bit odd, but that's another app that came out of the Tourism Challenge, and that is looking at how you move around the city and identify things almost on a whim. So, when you see something happening, like, what is that? How can you experience tourism in a way that is using digital tools that is a lot more sort of akin to how you actually are as a tourist. You're sort of seeing things as you walk past them. This is a project that we're running with Historic Environment Scotland, which is looking at better forecasting. I would like to have said a lot more about this today, but what we're trying to do there is forecast tourism numbers to the castle based on a variety of factors, including things like when Edinburgh's in the news, when Edinburgh is in TV and radio, when it's in a film like The Avengers, all that sort of stuff, and exchange rates, consumer confidence index. So we can build a better forecasting model to say how many people go to a castle in a year's time. So I'm hopefully we'll get somewhere of this in the next couple of weeks, and then I'll be really keen to share that with everyone as quickly as possible. And then we also funded a project with, this is my time with Data Lab, and we funded a project with the University of Strathclyde and looking at parking data in Edinburgh and trying to see if the lists data could predict how busy the parking was. And actually it was very good at doing that. So we can share some of that as well. So this program is looking to try and support you in 5 different ways. Talent, so getting data skills into your organization, upskilling you. It could be around research, maybe some of the areas that need a bit of long-term, perhaps a bit more risky. It could be just about adoption. You know, how do we get you started on that data journey? It could be around sharing your data or accessing new data sets for the city. And then using the world-class data infrastructure, this big data lake, to start practicing and experimenting. Because that's what we want to do. We want to help you experiment with this. And also help new companies get set up. I'll skip past that because it's, you can read it. So the final thing I just wanted to sort of to ask you really is, it's very much the early days for me. I want to chat to as many of you as possible. I really want to understand what the key issues are for you now, where you see yourselves going, and then start hopefully building projects and ideas that we can start using some of that amazing government investment to the benefit of the tourism industry using data. So please do visit the website, do contact me, do grab me at lunch. And here are some of all the partners that are involved in this. So the final thing was just to thank ETAG, Scottish Enterprise, Marketing Edinburgh, Festivals Edinburgh, because they've done an amazing job in supporting me as I'm getting speed with this, but also for everything we did around the Edinburgh Tourism Innovation Challenge and the funding to get some of the experiments going. So yes, thank you very much.